The very ethos of their people rested in the power of their army. An army that hitherto had shown no aggressive intent towards the British, it should be said. And they were intrigued that the British were intent upon its dissolution after the stoning of these two women in the Buffalo River. And the British king and his men made repeated attempts for peace. I must stress that. The Zulus did not want a war with the British. But the British rebuffed all overtures for peace and planned to invade Zululand, believing they could subdue the Zulus inside of 3 weeks. How wrong they'd be. Done that, he lifted his battle axe in his right hand and he bellowed at his men. He shouted, "Aisham, Einkan, Haba, to arms, go in." And 15,000 Zulus began to sprint off that escarpment headed for the camp. I want you to feel the ground shake as they stamp their feet. Hear those great rolling rhythmic war cries rolling out down the valley. And because of the colour of the shields, the more white in the shield, the more senior the regiment. You could identify regiments by the colour of the shield. From the left, we can tell you with confidence that we have the Utulwan, the Inhlanhla, the Ihloko, and the Inhloyangwe regiment. Then we have the Ututu, the Isango, the Notwengo, the Undi, the Unonkank, the Mbob, the Mtlang, the Kanempemf, the Mtrej, the Inhlap, the Inklap, the Mbonambi. And then down there in front of Durnford, the mighty Nkobama Kos and the Uwe regiments. You'll be pleased to hear, Sam, that we only test you on 6 of those names in the evening quiz. And these Zulus are now charging towards that thin red line. And when they got 600 yards from the British line, the British soldiers were ordered to open fire. Load, present, fire! And they began to put practice volleys into that approaching black mass. They firing the .45 caliber Martinian rifle, firing 480 grain soft lead cartridges, the same weight bullet we use today to shoot elephant and buffalo with. And Inchingwao Gamachola Kosa held a hasty consultation with his senior commanders, and they decided to attack the British camp. And 20,000 Zulu warriors came streaming out of that ravine, forming up into the right horn and the head and chest regiments of the Zulu army. I've not yet mentioned to you that the large force of Zulus seen in the morning by Whitelaw in that initial sighting were the left horn, who got themselves cleverly into a position of hiding behind Itusi, where they would attack from later on in our story, as you will hear. That my uncle's regiment were about to turn and withdraw. And had they withdrawn, they might have precipitated a mass withdrawal of Zulus as the middle of the line broke. And I think it very nearly happened. But he said a remarkable thing happened. Our old commander, much older man, called him Kosana Kampuntlana of the Biela clan. He stood up like a colossus behind our men, with his old grey cross around his shoulders and his Tartal head ring in his hair and his lion's claw necklace, the Zulu Royal Award for bravery, the Isek, round his neck. And he strode through his men right to the front, exposing himself to British rifle fire, and he turned his back on the British line and he faced his young warriors. And he bellowed at them, he shouted, "Yeninelapia, Ninga Baleg, Ninga Baleg, Silo, Utlatlana Bulalumlu, Ungashonga Njal." You men, don't run, don't run. The king, the small branch that extinguishes the flames. That's one of King Keshwa's praise names, and what a subtlety. He gave us no such order. He'd hardly uttered that cry when half of his head was carried away by a British bullet. But the rallying cry had been made and heard by his regiment and the regiments adjacent to it. And that old Zulu told David, wiping tears off his face, that in the face of this bravery and the supreme sacrifice of his own life in attempting to rally the Zulus would rise up like the water of the sea, and they would fall on that thin red line. And David promised that old Zulu, and I've promised his memory as he died on the 6th of October 1993, that we will never tell the story without relating to our guests who the Zulus believe is the true great hero of this battle. Her famous father died in 1883, but in 1884, 5 years after this war, she came back to the St. Vincent's Church at the Visitor Centre for a ceremony of remembrance and reconciliation. There were thousands of Zulus present. Sadly, very few white people attended. And after the service, Frances Ellen Kalenzo walked back onto this field with old Zulus. What a via dolorosa it must have been for her. And she came and sat down near that memorial where Colonel Durnford fell. And the Zulus gave her an accurate, lively rendition of what had happened here, highlighting the bravery of Durnford. They reminded her of how his body was completely unlooted. His ring, his pocket knife, his pocket watch, his uniform intact. And now his body was found lying next to a dead Zulu, and the two were covered by a great black shield of the Ngobamakosi regiment, that's akin to a Zulu burial on the field. And as the tears poured off her face, these Zulus put their big calloused hands on her shoulders, and they said, "Unga kalam tatuwet, unga kalam tanawan, don't cry, little child, don't cry, little sister, for one brave white man who we know you loved, we loved him too. There were a lot of brave men who died here, both white and black."